College Depot summer sessions. This is actually our very first session of the summer, Test Prep Essentials. So thank you for joining us bright and early on a Saturday morning. So thank you for coming. It's going to be myself. My name is Meryl Stewart, and Alexis is the other presenter as well. And we're going to be talking a wide range of topics about test prep. You're going to get some background information about the different tests that are available to you to take, and then some more specific study strategies and things like that. And as Alexis mentioned, this is going to be recorded, so it will be up on our website for future viewing later on if there's anything that you missed or if you want to refer back to it. And so without further ado, I also want to mention you're welcome to, with any questions, we'll both stop periodically and ask if anybody has questions. But if you do have any, feel free also to put them in the chat as well. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Alexis.
All right, Megan, if you'd like to go to the next slide. All right, so this slide has some more information about us at College Depot. So if you'd like to request an appointment with a one-on-one advisor, they're here to help students get ready for college and start applying for financial aid and any questions that you might have about what to do after high school. So feel free to call or make an appointment online, and you can do that through the information on this slide. And we'll have this PowerPoint available after the presentation so that students are able to get the information available in this PowerPoint, because I know that we're going to be going through some of these slides that have a lot of information pretty quickly. So if you'd like to go to the next slide. All right, well, Meryl sort of introduced us already, but as she said, this is the Test Prep Essentials presentation. This is presented by myself, Alexis, and Meryl. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, Megan, we already kind of covered this earlier. All right, so the first section of this presentation is going to be covering college entrance exams. And so the different types of college entrance exams or tests that are usually presented to students what things that are required by colleges usually are standardized tests. So those are going to be your ACT, your SAT, your college placement exam. So Accuplacer was an exam that was most commonly used by colleges up until recently, and MCC has been transitioning, Maricopa Community College has been transitioning to something called EdReady, and so we'll cover that in the next couple of slides. But that's just another type of college placement test. CELSA is Combined English Language Skills Assessment. That's another type of exam, but that's kind of specialized, and so we won't really be covering that. And then scores from these exams are used to determine eligibility for different courses. So your advisor will look at your scores from these exams and will place you in certain classes according to your skills. Other things that are usually needed for college entrance are your core courses GPA in high school, and then usually a personal statement, challenging coursework, so that's going to be something like a thesis, any extra work that you've done, letters of reference, and extracurricular activities. All right, so if you want to go to the next slide, we'll be covering some of the college placement tests. So for community college placement, this is a handy little chart that will sort of tell you, according to what some of your scores and your high school GPA, the types of classes that you can expect to be placed into roughly. So as you can tell, this chart is a little dated because it still has Accuplacer down at the bottom. And as I said earlier, schools like MCC are sort of transitioning to different tests. So now these might be replaced by EdReady, but these schools are still going to take Accuplacer results. And I'll go more into that in the next couple of slides. I know that might be a little confusing now. Anyway, so there are multiple options for placement, as I said earlier. So you can submit your ACT and your SAT, and that might help you get into a higher class when combined with your Accuplacer scores or your other test scores. It's always helpful to include more information when you're applying for college so that your advisor has more information to go off of. The SALSA, as I mentioned earlier, it is recommended for ELL students, so English language learners, and that'll sort of evaluate your readiness for college level English and reading. That's a time test, it's 45 minutes, and it's very similar to other tests that we're going to be covering today. The reading score for your Accuplacer test will not expire, but the other ones do, and I'll go into that a little more in the next slide. Megan, if you'd like to. All right, so Accuplacer basics. So as I said earlier, MCC is phasing out of Accuplacer, but they are still accepting Accuplacer results. The Accuplacer is an untimed computer-based test. There are fees for Accuplacer. Sometimes you can get these fees waived. I would talk to your school counselor or to an advisor at the community college that or the college you're applying to. Depending on if you're applying to a college or a university, there might be a preference for Accuplacer. I know that a lot of community colleges are switching over to EdReady, which we'll cover next, but Accuplacer is still widely accepted. And so if you do pay that fee, don't think of it as wasted money. If you are just planning on going to MCC where you know that they're accepting EdReady, that test will still be accepted. And they plan, to my knowledge, they plan to accept those test scores for the next couple of years. So for an Accuplacer, you don't need an appointment, but this information, it may have changed due to COVID. So you may need an appointment now, but if things, go back to normal, regularly you don't need an appointment. You can see the website test center for hours, and you can go to different test centers according to your community college. So for MCC, each of the community colleges have their own test center, and they all have their individual hours. For the Accuplacer, calculators are not permitted. Scratch paper and pencil are provided, which is a little tough. They give you a very basic calculator sometimes when you're doing your math section, and that just does sort of addition and subtraction, and that's usually, if you're taking the test online, that'll be online as well. There are no pass or fail scores for Accuplacer. It's just meant to determine what your ability is. And if you don't know a question, you're really encouraged to skip it. This is just meant to determine how much you know. So this test is also available for ELL learners. And the results are usually available within a couple of days, which means that a couple of days after taking it, you can determine whether or not you want to retest for a higher score or if you're happy with the course you've been placed into. So one retest is allowed after at least 24 hours of your previous test. And all placement scores are valid for 2 years. But as I said earlier, the reading never expires. All right. Any questions on Accuplacer? I know that might have been a little confusing, but if we don't have any questions, we can go to the next slide. All right, and so this is how the Accuplacer is usually split up in different sections. So arithmetic has 17 questions, college level math has 20 questions, and you'll just go through these questions. And as I said before, you can skip questions you don't know the answers to, and your ability to answer these questions correctly will determine what level math or reading or English you're going to be placed into. All right. Next slide. All right, so now going into EdReady, before I started talking about the details, I kind of wanted to show you this chart that shows what your different EdReady scores will translate to in terms of classes that you can get. And so when you get, the higher your EdReady score, the higher the ability of English that you are able to get into, or reading or math. Somebody has their hand raised. Do you have a question? Loredana and Audrey?
Oh. Yes, how come we cannot see the slides? You keep on mentioning the slide was moved, but I can't see any new slide.
Oh no, does anybody else see the slides in the chat? Can nobody see the slides?
I can see the slides.
Okay.
Alexis, this is Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
So that's normal. It really depends on the way that somebody joins. So Loredana, how did you join? Did you join on a browser or the actual application? Or how are you joining this session?
The application.
In the application, you might try, so it could be a permission setting, depending on the type of device that you have. You might try if you do the same, I can put the join link in the chat again, but if you go out and then join from a browser, I recommend Chrome or Microsoft Edge, then, and you can join as a guest, then you should be able to see the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I apologize for the inconvenience. All right, thank you. Sorry, Alexis, but that's a common issue we've had here and there. It's just the settings in Teams.
All right, no, you're good. Thank you very much. I'm glad that we got that sorted out sooner rather than later. But we have had a couple of people join after that. So please let us know if you can see the slides and hear everything. If we don't have any other issues, I can continue. All right. Okay. So as I was saying, this is the scores that you can get for EdReady, which are a placement test that you can take online. I wanted to show the scores first because I wanted to show how sometimes the differences in between different classes are just sort of up to what you get in the. Oh, sorry. I'm admitting someone else. Okay. So sometimes the difference between taking one course and another can be as simple as a couple of points. If you get less than a 60 in English as well as less than a 75 in reading, you'll go to an ALT class 100. But then if you get a little bit higher, you can qualify for English 101. And so within EdReady, you're able to improve these scores to get up to that higher class. Working within the system. So I'll explain that a little more in the next slide. But you get assigned a study plan based on what course you would like to take. And you tell EdReady, I'd like to take English 101. And if your score doesn't match up with that course, you're able to work within EdReady to improve that score without having to retake the test. And at the end, you can show your study plan to your advisor, and they are able to determine whether or not you'll qualify for that higher course level. Some of the higher level courses may still need Accuplacer. So for math, if you're going into a really advanced level math class, you may still need to take the Accuplacer test because I think EdReady is just not compatible with those higher level math classes yet. But if you'd like to go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about the details of EdReady. Okay, so EdReady was mostly used before when students didn't have a GPA, GED, ACT, SAT, or Accuplacer scores, but MCC is now transitioning mostly to EdReady. They'd like to use that as their main form of entrance exam in the future. But as I said before, they still continue to take Accuplacer scores, and they will still take your ACT and SAT scores, even with EdReady. The biggest difference between EdReady and Accuplacer is that EdReady is free to take, and it's a little easier to access. You can see it online. I've included a link at the bottom of this page, and you're able to take the test completely online at home, and you can take the test at your own pace. You can use your results from your test scores to prepare for placement or standardized tests. So it isn't just used for college placement. You can also use it to prepare for ACT and SAT. And it can be used to plan out your course of study, as I said before. So if you aren't able to get into the high math class that you might need for your degree, that when you're going into community college or university, you're able to work within EdReady, and they'll show you videos and have you take practice quizzes in order to learn that content so that you might be able to qualify for that higher course in the future. You are able to pass questions just like Accuplacer, but this one does not have a time limit, and you can finish it later. So you can stop in the middle of a test, and you can finish that up later when you have time. So it's a little more flexible, and this is what MCC is sort of encouraging new students to get familiar with in terms of placement tests. All right, please want to go to the next slide. All right, so this one, I don't know. if this is correct. This is not something that's on my slide. We can skip that, yes. All right, so these are some resources that are available. As I said, this PowerPoint will be available after we present. I'll put the link in the chat so that you're able to go back and access it with some resources for placement tests. So we have some test prep from MCC. We have the Accuplacer study app, and then some more resources from Phoenix College. And then finally the MCC course placement chart is actually something that I'd really encourage students to go take a look at because that will do a much better job of showing you what courses you're able to qualify with based on your placement test results. The charts that I showed you were a little simpler, believe it or not, and the course placement chart can be a little hard to read at times. So if you're having some trouble with that, I would really encourage you to make an appointment with one of our advisors or to go talk to an advisor at the community college or a university that you're trying to get into when reading any placement charts. They can be a little tricky sometimes. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of names, but I would really encourage you to take a look at that before thinking about applying to college and taking any of these placement tests, because then you can figure out what kind of score you're looking to get. And then last was the CELSA practice test. That's one of the tests that I mentioned earlier. But if you're interested in any of these links, come back to this PowerPoint. We can move on to SAT and ACT. All right, so SAT and ACT, why are they important? So they are both college entrance exams that distinguish students in admission processes. So different merit scholarships are awarded based on ACT or SAT scores, as well as during the admissions process, it will distinguish you from other students. When you're applying for scholarships, they'll often ask you for an ACT or SAT score, and you're usually given the option to submit both if you'd like. And I would encourage students to take both because if you don't like your score in one and you did a little better in the other, you're usually able to submit that. And if you did great in both, then that's awesome. You can submit both of them, and you might be able to qualify for more scholarships or for higher courses. The PSAT can qualify students for special scholarships or programs, such as the National Merit Scholarship and the National Hispanic Recognition Program. So as I said before, that could be the difference between you getting that scholarship over someone else who maybe didn't submit that extra score. All right, a little bit more about merit scholarships on the next slide. All right, so merit-based scholarships. So when you higher test scores equal higher scholarships when it comes to merit-based scholarships. So a higher GPA boosts low test scores. So even if you didn't do as great on your ACT or SAT, but you have an awesome GPA and you just aren't able to focus when it comes to large tests like that, having a higher GPA can help balance that out. And it goes the other way as well. Having higher test scores can boost a low GPA. If you really studied for your ACT or your SAT and you blew it out of the park and you did amazing, that can really help when your GPA might be struggling a little bit. All right, next slide. All right, so when may students take the ACT/SAT? Usually students take it in the spring of junior year. You're able to retest in the fall of senior year. And there are test dates that I've included in the next couple of slides, but we'll get to that. You're able to retest in the fall of senior year, and some districts mandate ACT in spring. So results. SAT is, you get your multiple choice results in 3 weeks, your essay results in plus 1 week extra, so in 4 weeks. College receives scores 10 days later. So if you've decided that you want to send your SAT scores to a college or a university, they will receive the scores 10 days after you. For ACT scores, for your multiple choice section, you'll get those in 10 days or more. And for your writing section, you'll get those in 2 weeks. Colleges receive those scores a week after you. All right, in the next couple of slides, so this next slide is the ACT test dates. As I said before, I know this slide has a lot of information. I'd really encourage you to come back and take a look at this, and these are also available online. Here, I can send a link into chat if you'd like. In the meantime, we can go to the next slide. that has SAT test dates. All right, and I'll go ahead and send a link to both of these in the chat. All right. All right, if you'd like to move on to the next slide. Okay. All right, so ideally you would take both tests and use the highest score, or take both practice tests and choose your best option. So if you take both practice tests, this is a great way of sort of getting acquainted with both tests and being prepared ahead of time, just in general. But after you see those results, if you determine that the SAT is not for you, if it's way too complicated, or the ACT, it's too fast, you're able to choose which one you'd like to take first. Again, I would encourage you to take both. But if you do want to only take one, I only took the ACT and I used that score myself, and that works just as well. But again, sometimes when you're applying for scholarships or different schools, having both of those results can be the difference between you and a different student. So the main differences between the SAT and the ACT are that the SAT gives you more time per question. You get a little bit more overall time. You get 5 minutes extra. But you do not get a calculator for the math section. You get a piece of paper and a pencil. But the SAT has fewer geometry questions. So the timing and scoring breakdown is in the chart below, if you'd like to take a look at it. The ACT is faster paced. It has a tough science section, and it has many geometry questions. And so the breakdown underneath that will give you a little bit of a better idea of how many questions are in each section and how those are broken down. All right. We can go to the next slide if you'd like. And so these are so this is going to be the SAT score report. So when you get your results, this is what it looks like. It's going to have a lot of numbers. It's going to show your scores for the different sections. And so we're just going to look at the main difference between the ACT and the SAT right now. So here you get your score. Your total score for the SAT is going to seem a lot higher than ACT. It's usually in the hundreds or the thousands. I think right now it's just in the hundreds. And that'll be at the top. That'll be the biggest numbers you get on the ACT score report. And they'll break down a detailed breakdown of your individual sections as well. And that is going to be similar in the ACT score report, which we'll see in the next slide. And so this is the ACT score report. So if you want to take a look at the left side of the screen, you'll be able to see that the scores are broken down a little differently. These will be in a lot lower numbers, but that is just how the ACT is graded versus the SAT. It'll tell you where you've ranked according to your peers, what your ranking is, and it'll give you some detailed results, which are similar on the ACT. But here on the SAT, it'll give you a section on college and career planning as well. And I would really encourage you to look over your results with an advisor, either here or at your school, because they can give you a better idea of whether or not you'd like to retest and what score you can really be aiming for and how to improve that score as well. All right.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. That's a thumbs up, yes?
Let me see if anyone in the chat says otherwise. Can everyone hear Meryl?
Before I...
Okay, we got a yes in the chat.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Alexis, for going over those slides. Does anyone have questions before we move on?
Yeah, I had a quick question about qualifying for a National Merit Scholarship based on your PSAT score. How do they release like the numbers that, or the, I guess the score that you should receive, or the percentile ranking that you should get into when you take those tests, when you take the PSAT in order to qualify for the National Merit Scholarship?
So Alexis, I'm not sure if you know, I would think you might know a little bit more than myself, but I would think that's a great question. I would think your counselor would be able to advise you on what specific scores you're shooting for and what percentile in order to meet that criteria for the scholarship. Does that sound correct, Alexis?
Yes, I believe that is correct. I think they give you a cutoff. I believe that they give you a cutoff, grade. So if you get lower than a certain percentile in the PSAT, you are not considered for some national merit scholarships, but those are usually the lower scores. And I think after that, you are mostly compared to your peers, I believe. But I do believe it's just a cutoff score. And I think it depends on the National Merit Scholarship. I believe it depends on the National Merit Scholarship you're applying for. I think I would contact your advisor for more information, because I do not know if those scores are the same all around. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Very good question. Anything else before we move forward? Okay, well, just again, you can always put anything in the chat if you do have questions, but I will be stopping periodically. So now we're going to move forward and talk about how you register for the two main tests, which is the SAT and the ACT. And the SAT, you're going to go to the collegeboard.com. That's their main website. And it's going to be $55 or $68 with essay. And I do want to point out we have essay on here because the essay is actually going away in most states, not all states. So I believe the official date was June of this year. However, there are some states where it's still available to you. And I'm just not sure if Arizona is one of them or not, because again, this just happened. So certainly if you're interested in the essay portion, you can go to College Board and take a look and see if it's still available in your state. But it is additional charge of $68 if you did want to take the essay. And then the ACT, you would just go to act.org, and it's $60 for the test or $80 with the essay or writing portion, and that is remaining the same. The important point I want to talk about here is if you do receive free or reduced lunch and you qualify for that, you can actually get up to two free exams for both the SAT and the ACT. So that's really, really helpful. So I would really recommend taking advantage of that. And all you need to do is visit your school counseling office, and they will get you that fee waiver and walk you through the process of doing that. But getting two free exams for either the SAT or ACT could really help if you do get that free or reduced lunch. Okay, next. So now we're going to get into resources specifically about how you prepare for both the SAT and the ACT. There's a lot of free resources out there. So that's where I want to start is really, there's going to be things on the internet that are going to try and sell you where you have to spend money on resources, but there's just so many free resources that I would say ignore all of those. You really, really don't need to spend any money on SAT or ACT prep. There's just a lot of great free resources. Starting with, you can actually go right to College Board, and it does get a little confusing, by the way, when I say College Board. That is the SAT, all the SAT information. That's where you sign up, as we mentioned, things like that. So it's called College Board, and it's collegereadiness.collegeboard.org, and then you can do the /SAT practice, or you can just search for it when you get to the site. And they have quite a bit of information. I really encourage you to go to their website and take a look at what they have there. I mean, they not only have obviously the registration, but they have a lot of test prep information. They have partnered with Khan Academy, and we actually also have links off of our website as well for Khan Academy studying, but SAT now has their own prep that they've partnered with Khan Academy. And I don't know if any of you have used that for studying, but it's a really great resource. They also have their own preparation booklet, again, free, that can help you study and has different information in there as well. The other thing, which some of you, if you've already taken the PSAT, would have gotten my College Quick Start guide with your PSAT scores. And it's actually a really nice online college and career planning kit. I believe you just need the login, again, when you take that PSAT. So I encourage you, if you have not looked into that when you got your documentation with your scores, definitely go back to the site and log in, because they have information about college matches, major, you can research majors, and then also even more information, as Alexis had showed you the score report, if there's any confusion on that. But again, utilize all of these resources. I know there's a lot and it can be overwhelming, but utilize what you can, and it'll help you along the way. For students with a disability, it's very important that if you do need some accommodations for the test, that you go to the College Board website. There's also a phone number here on the slide, which again, you'll have reference to once we post it online. But the most important thing is allowing up to 7 weeks. So you need to gather your documentation. They'll tell you what they need from you, but it can take up to 7 weeks in order to get that approval. So if you do need that accommodation, make sure to allow enough time for that. So that's the most important point on the accommodations. And then the only last thing I do want to mention, the same thing for ACT prep. It's okay, you can move forward. But if you do just general Google searches, if you don't go directly to some of these websites that we're highlighting today, if you just say SAT prep or SAT prep, be very, very careful, because the sites that come up first are going to be the for-pay ones, the ones that want to get your money, right? So again, you want to be careful if any place is asking you for money, because there's so many of these free resources. But I know sometimes just if you maybe forget the ACT site you have here or whatever, and you go and do a Google search and you say SAT prep, just be careful, because it will direct you. Some of these sites are going to ask for money. As soon as you see that, I would just leave that site and go back to some of these others that we're talking about today. So ACT prep resources, this one's a little bit more obvious, because you just go to actstudent.org. It's not quite as confusing as the SAT one, and they have their own website. And the interesting thing, as I was just talking about for pay sites, on the ACT website, you do want to be careful, because they actually do also have things that you can pay for on their site. They have some books, and I think they even have some courses on there. So when you see the test prep link at the top, you want to then, it's a drop down, you want to make sure you go to the free ACT test prep, because they actually do have some things right on their website that you can pay for. So make sure to click on the free ACT test prep. They actually have online video lessons, which are really helpful, interactive practice questions. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later, how critical it is for you to be doing practice questions and practice tests. And also educational games that'll help you with your studying for the test. They have a question of the day, they have a full study guide, and even webinars. So again, there's so much information out there at your disposal. It's just really allowing yourself enough time to go through it and see what works for you, because of course each student is different, and that's what's nice about having so many resources. What might work for one student might not work for another student. So the nice thing is having all these different options. You can see which types of studying, like if you like the online video lessons versus the study guide they have, so you can see which works best for you. And then there's also links to some free online practice as well. Now I put on here, this is in case there are some students, if you like a physical book, it's a little old school, but if you actually want a book that you can write your notes in, they do again have them for sale on their website, and there's some here. Another option, if you really did want a book, well, first of all, at the library, and I'll get into that a little bit later, we of course have free books here that you can check out with a library card, but you just can't write in it, of course, right? But if you also didn't want to maybe spend this money, you could always go to a used bookstore is another option if you really do want that physical book. There might be some writing in it, but it could be a lot cheaper. So that's just another option for those students who really like to have that physical book that you can write and take notes in. Any questions on the resources before we move forward? Okay, no questions, I think. So, and if anything comes up later, feel free to just put it in the chat.
No questions in the chat so far.
Wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to get into some specific strategies, and because we have a limited amount of time, there's just a few strategies that I wanted to highlight today. But again, the key areas where you're going to get additional strategies are those free resources that I mentioned right on the websites, and some of the resources I'll mention later. That there's going to be a whole bunch of strategies for you to utilize. Now, again, as we talked about with studying, the same thing with these strategies. They're not for every student. Some things might work for one student that might not work for another. So whatever, the nice thing is having a bunch of different strategies, you can figure out which ones work for you as you're doing those practice tests to see. So Alexis had mentioned earlier about some of the specifics on how long the ACT is a 2-hour and 55-minute test, and it has 215 questions, and the SAT is 3 hours and it has 154 questions. So there is a difference in between the two tests for sure. One of the things you want to be focused on is that time. You want to know how long you have to answer each question. So one of the tricks that experts say is to try and get the easy questions right as quickly as possible and get the difficult questions wrong also as quickly as possible. And that's going to be up to you to recognize which questions are difficult. And as you study, you're going to know where your strengths and your weaknesses are on the test. So you're going to know certain areas, certain topics that are really easy to you, and you're going to be able to know that those questions are easy for you to answer, right? And if there's a certain subject that you're just struggling with, and it's going to happen, so don't stress over that. You certainly can't be an expert in everything that's on these tests. So, but recognizing which of those questions might be more difficult for you and recognizing them quickly is really important. And the reason you want to know that is because not all of you might be aware of this, but you do not lose points for a wrong answer. So again, I want to say that you don't lose points for a wrong answer. So you don't want to leave anything blank. So even if you know that it's a subject that's really difficult for you and a subject that you're completely maybe even guessing on that question, go ahead and do that, because you definitely don't want to lose the potential, even if it's a guess, it's a potential for a right answer, right? But you won't lose points for a wrong answer. That's really important. It used to be back in my day on the SAT, especially, it was a whole different thing where you would be very worried about that because you would lose points for a wrong answer, but that doesn't happen anymore. And so guess on those ones. So recognize those questions that you just know, you know what, there's no way I'm going to be able to figure this out in this time period. Go ahead and guess on those. And basically you're sacrificing to succeed so you can move forward and get to those questions that you know you'll be able to answer correctly. There's also another little tip that you can do is sort of asking yourself as you're reading the question, is this one I should do right now or should I do it later? So the right now ones, again, are going to be the easy questions that you think you can answer pretty quickly or might not need to spend too much time on. The do later is a little bit of a different category than the ones that you're just going to guess on. Do later is that you think you can probably work out the answer, but it's just going to take you a little bit of extra time so you can come back to that. So you feel pretty confident that if you have a little bit extra time. Now, again, the thing is, it is a to do later if you do use this strategy. You just want to make sure that you don't forget about it, right? You want to make sure you come back to that question and actually answer it, even if you don't have time to actually work through whatever the problem is. Also, if a question, be cautious and careful of questions that seem too easy, or if the answer is just way too obvious. Sometimes they could be incorrect answers. They do, unfortunately, like to trick you a little bit. That happens. So just, I mean, there's going to be cases where the answer is very obvious and that is the correct answer. But just question it sometimes when they're really too easy. You want to do that. So any questions on that? Okay, we can move forward. So now another strategy is to bubble in blocks. So you're going to be given a sheet to fill out. You're going to be using a number 2 pencil. Believe it or not, back in my day, they did that. That's been staying the same. That's been consistent. But you want to answer questions in blocks of 10 and then transfer those as a group to the bubble sheet with your pencil. And actually, they figured out that this can actually shave 8 seconds on each of the transfers, giving you time to answer potentially 2 additional questions. And it doesn't sound like a lot, 8 seconds, but again, when you have a time test like both of these are, every second really and every minute counts. So doing this strategy can be very helpful. And certainly, again, when you do your practice tests, you can see if this works, try this strategy out and see if it works well for you. But they have found, if it's done correctly, that you can get additional time to get 2 additional questions answered, which would be great, especially if you know the answers to those. And then you want to reserve the last couple of minutes to check that all the bubbles are actually filled in. As I mentioned before, with some of the guessing and then also doing some of the do now or do later questions, you don't ever want to leave a bubble blank, right? Because as I said, you don't get any points off for an incorrect answer. So you want to at least give yourself a fighting chance of guessing on those, and you don't want just a blank question, because of course, what is a blank question is you have no chance of getting points on that. So just make sure to allow that last couple of minutes to make sure that you have answered all the questions and all the bubbles are filled in. So this strategy is a process of elimination, which you've maybe utilized on multiple choice questions in your classes in school. So it's not something you probably haven't seen before, but it's really looking at the question and then figuring out that sometimes incorrect answers may be really easy to spot and eliminate. So this question is, what's the capital of Malawi? And I apologize for my pronunciation, but I believe that's correct. And if Megan can hit a couple times, and then one more time. And so first of all, Malawi, we know New York, right? New York City is not the capital of Malawi, and Paris is definitely not the capital of Malawi. So those are really easy and obvious incorrect answers. So now what you've done is you've taken out 2 of the questions out of the 4, and now you have a 50% chance, which is a much better chance. Even if you don't know the correct answer, you now have limited yourself down to just 2 possibilities. So, which is, of course, much better odds, 50% you can get this correct. So eliminate those easy incorrect answers that might be really easy to spot and say, you know what, those are just definitely wrong. And the answer on this one is actually D, it's Kinshasa, if I, again, pronounce that correctly. So that's the correct answer, but that is a really good strategy to look for those obvious incorrect answers and eliminate them, and then give yourself a better chance of answering the question correctly. Okay, so now we're going to get into some more free and great resources, and some of these are through the Phoenix Public Library. So I actually have a question, and you guys can answer in the chat. Is who in this group has actually a Phoenix Public Library card? And I'll give you a moment to answer. And Hopefully lots of you, but if not, I will tell you how to get one.
All right, we already have a couple of answers in the chat. So Loredana and Audrey said we, so I think that means we do. And then Priscilla said that they do, and Lauren as well, and Maria, and Isabella as well.
Wonderful. Okay, that makes me happy. So for those of you who don't, well, first of all, also for those of you who do, just make sure that the library cards do expire. I believe it's every 2 years, so you do want to make sure your library card is up to date. It's pretty easy to do, and you just might need to renew it. And now that the buildings are open again for in-person, it's very easy to do. So for the rest of the students that don't, I highly recommend getting a library card for multiple reasons, but we're going to focus today on the different studying tools that you'll be able to utilize with a library card. And you can actually, there is something called an e-card, and we had it prior to COVID, and we still do have it, where you can go online and get a library card where it would just be for online use, and you couldn't check out physical books. But again, now that the libraries, the buildings are open, it's very easy to go into any library branch and get a library card. They'll just ask you for, most of you will have a student ID, or if you have a driver's license, that as well. And it just takes a couple minutes to get a card. And then you have access to a lot of wonderful things to help you study. First of all, just practice books. We do have practice books on both tests at the library. One thing to keep in mind is that they can be popular. So if you want to allow time to, possibly you might be on a wait list for some of the books. The other thing about a physical book, again, a lot of them are really good, but you would have to print out the practice test bubble sheets, because you cannot write, and sometimes people forget that, but you cannot write in a library book that's getting loaned out to multiple people. So that's just something to consider with that, that you would have to print it out. But there's actually some wonderful online resources. And the main one that I want to highlight today is called Learning Express Library. And you can utilize that from home with your library card. And then once you go into the Phoenix Public Library, there's always multiple ways to get to different resources, the online resources. I would say the easiest for most of you, since you've probably come to the College Depot website, we actually have a link under, we have a bunch of tiles that says resources in the center. And once you click on that, there's going to be multiple options. And there's one with ACT and SAT prep. Once you click on that, you're going to actually see a direct link right to Learning Express Library, as well as some others. There's Khan Academy there and some other things, but it's a nice and easy way to get to Learning Express Library. And from home, it will just require you to use your library card. And then it will also require you to create an account. So just a username and a password. And the reason it does that is because if you start utilizing the resources on the database, it will remember where you are if you're taking a course or if you're doing practice tests. So it's really worth it for you to create, and I believe you have to in order to access most of the items. But all you have to do is do a simple search for, say, ACT, if that's the one you're studying, and you'll actually see that they have courses, specific courses, a math course or a science course, and then they also have lots of practice tests, and then they also have ebooks, believe it or not. So that's another option. You can actually utilize the ebooks, but for both the tests, there's a ton of resources just under this one database. So I really recommend getting that library card and utilizing that. And the thing you're going to really like is all the practice tests, because practicing and taking the test, I can't emphasize enough how much that's going to increase your comfort level when it's time for you to actually take the real test. You're going to understand what the test looks like. You're going to get comfortable with the types of questions that are on the test. So utilize all these free practice tests, again, right on the direct SAT and ACT websites, but also here at Learning Express Library. And I'll get into a little bit later how many you should be taking, because it's a lot. You really want to take as many as you can to get yourself comfortable. Another great resource is Quizlet. We actually have a specific Quizlet is to explain. It's a site where you can, it's for the public, where you can create your own flashcards and build vocabulary lists and even practice questions. So because it's a public site, people have already created, you can go in there and search for ACT vocabulary lists. And you can see other people who've started them and are sharing them with the public. Now you can go in there and create flashcards, your own personal ones, and not worry. You don't have, you can make it private where you don't share with other people, and that's fine too. There is a premium level of the website where that's, you know, for pay. So I would utilize the free resources that are available. And we have on the screen, we do have College Depot has some vocabulary lists there. They're relatively old. They haven't been updated, but of course, a lot of the vocabulary, it's going to be very similar. And then you can also always find additional flashcards if you just do a search for ACT or SAT, and it's really great. I mean, I really like using flashcards. Again, that'll depend on the student and your style of studying, but I think it's just a nice, really useful and helpful tool if you do utilize those kind of things. And then just a quick Accuplacer, since Alexis talked about that, there is also practice tests for that. Learning Express Library also has Accuplacer practice tests, as well as there might be some books that you could check out as well. So any questions? Okay. Okay, we can move ahead if there's no questions. Okay, so now we're going to get into some specific study strategies again for how you study. Some of these will be useful to you, and some of them, again, personal preference might not be. But I encourage you at least to try some of these and then find, instead of just deciding, you know what, I don't think I want to do that, definitely attempt to try some of these, because then you're going to find out if they work for you. And there's a reason that we highlight these, is because they do work for a lot of students, and they find them really, really useful and actually help them increase their scores on these tests. So number one, and I congratulate you, because the fact that you guys are here today early on a Saturday morning is taking plenty of time to prepare for the test. Allowing that time so you're not cramming, so you're not stressed out before the test, and just giving yourself time to go through all these resources that we're highlighting today. So testing experts recommend studying 3 to 6 months before the test date. Now, this might not be possible for everybody, because I know depending on what grade you're in, I know there's one coming up that you would have already had to sign up on July 17th, which is a week, I believe, a week from today. And then there's the next one that you still will be able to sign up for is September 11th. And the key thing is that you do need to sign up by August 6th. So you want to make sure that you figure out when you want to take the test, and then plan your studying accordingly. There's also additional test dates into the fall as well. But if you can really allow, as close to that 6 months, which of course not everybody can do that, but allow as much time as you can before that test date. Making a study schedule and sticking to that study schedule. So approximately 1 to 2 hours per week is where it's a good place to start, and then you can slowly increase your time. And I would encourage you to make this formal. So instead of just sitting here today saying, you know what, I'll try and do 1 to 2 hours every week, I would say put an alert in your phone for a certain time of the day, or put it on either your phone calendar or a physical calendar if you guys still have an old, paper calendar. But make it a formal time to study, say from 4 to 6, twice a week or 3 times a week. And then you're actually committed. And even setting up that alert on your phone, you might forget about it or not really want to do it, but then you get that alert on your phone, and it'll help you be accountable for these study times. So I would say make a study schedule, and again, make it a formal study schedule, and then slowly increase that time as you get closer to the test if needed. And then spreading that study time, as we're just mentioning, over days, weeks, or even months, because even though you're going to be studying a lot, you also, you can get burnt out, right? You don't want to be studying so much in a short period of time, that you're not retaining the information and you don't want to get yourself burnt out. That's the whole reason to do 1 to 2 hours per week in enough time several months before, so then you don't, and you're still motivated to do the studying, and it'll just work better for you allowing that time. Getting comfortable with the tests. So the number one thing is as we mentioned, it's going to decrease your stress level because you're going to understand the types of questions that are on there. And then it'll actually help you focus your studying. It's going to help you see what your strengths and your weaknesses are depending on the certain subjects. And it'll help you focus your studying. So for example, you find that you are struggling with some of the math questions. Well, then you know that that's where you, and then you do really well on other topics. Then you know that you don't necessarily need to spend as much time on everything else, but you really want to focus your studying on math and really spend those 1 to 2 hours per week on math. And it'll give you a baseline too, as well, of where you need to be. If you do take those practice tests, you'll see, well, this is where I'm starting and this is where I need to get to. So they do recommend taking at least 2 practice exams, but I feel like that is the bare minimum that you want to take. You actually want to shoot for 4 to 10 practice exams, and I would shoot for those 10. And because there are so many resources with free practice tests, there's really no reason not to take, right, as many as you can. So I really recommend taking those practice tests. It'll give you that baseline. It'll get you comfortable. You do want to take that first practice test before you start your studying for the actual test, because it'll tell you where you need to focus your studying, as I mentioned, and give you that baseline. And then you can take the last one closer to the actual test date. And it'll be up to you for your comfort level, how close to the test you want to take that. Some people might get too stressed out if they take it, take one right the day before. Maybe you can think taking one a week before to see how you are, and then you have a little bit of time to focus any last minute studying that you might need. But it gives you, again, an idea of how far you've come and what you might need to work on. And I can't emphasize timing yourself enough. So a lot of students actually are great about taking practice tests, but they're just taking them sitting at their desk, and they're spending 10 minutes on each question, sort of just doing the test. Well, that doesn't tell you anything, right? Because these are timed tests. That's one of the biggest factors of the test, is how you can finish these tests in 2 hours and 55 minutes or 3 hours. So it's really, really important as you're taking these practice tests to time yourself. So have your phone next to you and set that timer so you know that you're meeting the allowed times. And it'll give you an idea of what are the types of questions, where am I spending too much time, right? Because sometimes you might not even realize it until you've timed yourself and you all of a sudden realize you're spending way too much time and you barely got through half the test. Then you're prepared for the real test and you'll know how much time you need for each question. Diversifying your study methods. Again, this is a lot of focused studying. You can get bored very easily. You want to keep yourself engaged, and you also want to, do what's best for you to retain a lot of this information. So you can take notes, make flashcards, as we mentioned, and study sheets on Quizlet. You can use that resource for that, or make your own. That's fine too. Keeping your notes organized is also very important. It just will decrease your stress level. Like if you want to focus on science one day or math another day, or maybe you're doing the writing another. So keeping those organized. I love color-coded different sets of notes. Not everybody's big on color and colored highlighters, but that's a big thing for me. I love colored pencils and colored highlighters. So that's an easy way to color code your notes. And then last, I want to talk about a study group. Not all of you maybe have utilized a study group before, and I've been skeptical in the past, but there's actually really a lot of great benefits to having a study group. First of all, you're going through the same thing with your friends, right? They're all studying for the same tests. So you all have a common goal, and you can support each other through this process, which of course can be stressful. And so it's stress relief in that support. Also, it gives you accountability. If you have a study group that you're scheduled to meet with each week or every 2 weeks, you're going to be accountable. You're going to make sure then that you're sticking to your study schedule, and you'll be there ready to go when you go to that study group. And then also, each person in the study group has different strengths and different areas of expertise. So that's also really helpful, and it'll make studying easier. So if you're weak in one area, but someone else in the study group is really strong in another area, then you can utilize that person and their expertise and actually possibly increase your score in whatever topic that they're strong in. Any questions?
We don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay. Well, I think these are, I mean, for these, the study strategies, they're pretty obvious. Like, there's nothing complicated about them. What the key is really getting yourself to utilize these study strategies and do them. Like, get together with your friends and create that study group, take those practice exams, and just, you know, make that study schedule. That's going to be, I think, the number one goal for each of you. Okay, so now we're going to get into some stress relief, because again, we acknowledge this can be a stressful process, right? All this studying, getting ready for these tests. So there's some things that you can do the night before and the morning of your exam that you want to be focused on. So number one, remember, the brain cannot easily remember new information. I know I am a recovering crammer. I do a lot of things last minute for studying. I've always been that way. But it really, all you're doing is making yourself stressed out, because the brain, and even though you guys have young brains, it just can't remember new information very easily. And it's going to get you sort of lose your focus on all the information that you already know. So you really want to try and not cram anything the night before. If you really feel strongly, and I know probably a lot of you do, that you want to review, only review information that you already know. I would really recommend doing that. Again, I know it's hard because to just not study or do anything the night before. So if you really feel the need to do something, don't try and learn anything new, any new material. Just review information that you already know, and then you'll feel comfortable with that. Energize. This is one that a lot of students don't really think about, is how important it is what you eat and the amount of sleep you get before your test. Again, this is about, you know, keeping your body and your brain stress-free as much as possible, so you're going into the test in the best frame of mind possible. So getting that good night of sleep is really important. They recommend 7 to 9 hours is the best. I will say with the sleep, don't stress about, like, I must get 9 hours. It's just shooting for that good night's sleep, and not doing maybe some of your habits of like playing video games until 2 o'clock in the morning the night before, or reading a good book the night before too late, right? You just want to go in knowing that, you know, I'm going to try and get a good night's sleep the night before, but don't cause yourself stress over it. Just don't do some of those maybe bad habits that we all have about staying up too late before a test. Eating a good breakfast, and I'll get into some more specifics. I have some more information about the types of things that you can eat for breakfast, but I used to be someone who would skip breakfast all the time, and I was very skeptical because I never really wanted breakfast, but it makes such a difference in your energy, even your mood, and your brain function if you eat a good breakfast filled with protein. That's really the most important. And listening to music, this is just a suggestion, again, things to sort of make you relaxed, or read like a light magazine or something like that to help you wake up, to keep you stress-free while you're going through all this. The morning of. Being prepared, so getting your materials ready the night before, including new batteries for your calculator, and your photo ID. It can be a school ID or a permit or a driver's license. And then you can bring water and a snack. You won't be able to eat it while you're in there, but you can bring it for a break. There is going to be a break. And what I would recommend for getting your materials ready, I highlighted the SAT website, the College Board website, and then the ACT website. They both have really, really great area about test day preparation. There's different language. I think the ACT, it says test day. You can look for that. And once you click on that, it gives you a whole bunch of information, what are the types of materials you can bring, what you need to bring. It even tells you, again, the calculator. It has to be a specific type of calculator. You can't just bring any type of calculator. And then on the SAT website, it has what to expect on test day is what you're going to look for. So I highly encourage you to go to both of those websites, depending on which test you're taking, and just read through that so you're prepared and you're ready to go. And you will have all that information available to you. So it's one less thing to stress about, right, is knowing what you need to bring. So any questions on that?
Lauren says, I appreciate the tips. I definitely was tempted to cram the day before.
Well, Lauren, since I know you, I'm not surprised. And that it's especially when you want to do so well in the testing, you spend all this time. But reviewing, again, if you really feel the need, I think it's fine, because I do the same thing. It's just trying to review information you already know, I think, is a much better strategy, because then you're getting comfortable with that. But trying to cram new information, which we all try and do, it's not useful. So great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so now we're going to just get into, again, some more stress relief type strategies and study some fun study strategies that I'm going to show you. So we'll go ahead and start with music is instrumental. And this one I was also skeptical on. However, especially during COVID and working from home, I've started to utilize this quite a bit. They've actually done studies about studying with music and how it can really help you focus. And a lot of you might already do this, but turning on, staying away from anything, though, that you can sing along to is important. And you can go ahead, Megan, and show us a couple more. There we go. And what you want to do is not play music that you love and that you can sing along to. So, because every word that you hear is going to be a mental distraction. So the key thing is with listening to music is you want genres of, like, I listen to classical, you guys might really not like that. So there's actually some other options. It's just nice background and relaxing music. But the nice options for you guys might be something like video game soundtracks. There's a lot of soundtracks that are not going to have any words to them. Also, even movie scores. If you have a favorite movie that you like, and specifically the scores, not the soundtrack, because they can be different. The soundtrack's going to have songs with words in them. But just having that music in the background has helped me focus quite a bit. So I recommend for you guys to do that. But again, just don't have any of those songs that have words in them, because then you're going to want to sing and not pay attention to your studying, of course, right? So the next one is the Pomodoro technique. And again, this is just a technique that I'm sharing. It might not work for you, but it's a little way to try and gauge your time and how much that you're actually studying. So what it is, the person who came up with it is basically you work for 25 minutes without interruption, and then you take a 5-minute break to relax. And then once you have, and each 25 minutes is called a Pomodoro. And the reason it's called that is because the type of timer that the person who came up with this technique utilized. And so for every 4 Pomodoro, so that's 4 25-minute time periods, you then can take a 15-minute break. And this basically breaks down the daunting tasks of studying into sort of approachable chunks of time. some of you might just like study, you know, for a straight hour together. I would recommend, because I'm that type of person too, and I find taking breaks is very, very important. It'll rejuvenate you. It'll let you take, you know, even that 5-minute break will make a difference in your studying, I think. And I'm notorious for not doing that. So that's why I like this technique, because it's just sort of, it's very specific, you know, study for 20 minutes, then take a 5. And once you do 4 25-minute chunks, then you can take a 15-minute break. So that's just an idea. So next we have distraction apps. Now, I'm not sure if any of you or maybe even your parents have utilized some of these for your social media usage. And these are just 3 examples, but there's actually a lot of them because a lot of us need these types of apps. And basically what they are is they are restriction apps to regulate your social media intake. Because social media, they distract you from getting other things done, right? And I'm not just saying you, it's all of us. It's every person in the world today really needs some of these distraction apps because we all spend a lot of time on various social media. So for example, self-control, it blocks specific websites up to 24 hours. So you would put in, so say you spend too much time on Instagram. So you would put in that and it would block Instagram for 24 hours if you want to get certain studying done in that 24 hours. Cold turkey blocks specific websites at scheduled times. So you can actually schedule like maybe a 2-hour period, a 4-hour period to block that Instagram usage. And the last one, freedom, this one scares me and it probably will scare you when I talk about it. It basically prevents you from using the internet at all. So no internet use at all. So that one, I'm not sure. That one's pretty extreme, but it is an option for you. So has anybody, I'll ask in the chat, has anybody used any distraction apps in this group?
Lauren says I have. Maria says no.
No, okay. Okay.
Oh, Kiana has her hand raised, or never mind, it is down now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I would, you know, depending on the student, some of them might find these useful, some not, but I do like the idea of maybe like the scheduled time one where you want to be studying and it won't allow you to get onto Instagram or wherever for those couple hours, or even the 24 hours too is a nice idea. So the next technique is one that you guys may probably have not heard of Jerry Seinfeld, but the technique is universal. So the reason it's called the Seinfeld technique is because he's very, very famous. He's extremely successful. At one point, he had the most successful sitcom on TV. But what he did, so when he was starting out, an up-and-coming comedian, he used to force himself to write jokes every single day using 2 very simple tools. He would use a big wall calendar and a big red marker. And every day that he wrote a joke, he would put a big red X on that date. Now, this is a great motivational tool to help build a study habit because it gets you motivated to not want to have a blank page, right, or a blank day. You want to keep seeing those X's go throughout your week. And it's just a simple motivational tool. But I think it can be useful, again, for some of you. And I actually like utilizing calendars for that reason as well. So again, just simply a wall calendar and a big red marker, whatever color, since I mentioned I like color, any color marker you like, and trying to keep that chain of X's to build up into that study habit. So light exercise. So they've actually, again, this is another study they've done. They've done studies where it's proven to help with retention and recall. The key thing is it's not the light exercise prior or after studying, it's actually doing some light exercise while you're studying. So of course, not everybody has access to a treadmill. So that's one of the examples, but just things like even doing bicep curls or, some other chair squats, things like that. It sort of also puts a little bit of a break, right? It gets you up out of your chair, which is important, I think, too, because we can just get glued to our chairs. And doing that little bit of light intensity, it helps with the retention and the recall. And then last, change of scenery. This one is important as I mentioned, I get stuck in one chair and I can just be there for 3 hours, 4 hours. And they've actually done, a cognitive psychologist has actually did a study with college students who reviewed vocabulary words in 2 different rooms and recalled 20% more words, which I thought was pretty amazing. I mean, that's quite a bit more retention. So just making sure to get up, and if you have another room you can go into, I really recommend doing that. The key thing, there is a big warning with this one, is you want to avoid very comfortable furniture. So it's not getting up from your chair and going into your bed, because what will happen, right? You could get sleepy and you might fall asleep, and that defeats the whole purpose. So you, and a really comfortable couch or things like that. So you want to really still stay in, a study type of chair, but you can maybe take it to another room so it'll change your scenery. Yeah, that's a hard one. And I know some of you probably, and I know other people do, they study, on their beds or have their laptop. But if I really need to focus and study, because I will want to take a nap. But some of you might be able to do it, but that's going to be a personal preference. Okay, so now if you have 1 day left, the key thing, the 2 main things I would say focus on here is relaxation and getting that rest, and just keeping yourself mentally focused and not stressed out, trying to keep that stress level down. So very simply, watching cute movies or cute videos on the internet. And basically, it actually also helps with your ability to focus as well. But just a couple examples, and I recommend for you guys to, once we're done, to go, the sneezing baby panda, and maybe some of you have seen it. Oh my gosh, I'm smiling just thinking about it. It's super cute. And it just makes you happy. And of course, it decreases your stress level. So there's a couple different ones. If you have a favorite type of dog, I know people, when we've done this presentation before, mentioned that if you have a favorite dog, you can go look for cute corgi videos or something along those lines. But lots of cute ones out there. If you're finding yourself really getting stressed the day before, I recommend going to do this. And even as you're studying, even if it's a couple months, if you just need a study break, something to do, go watch some cute videos on the internet. Eating protein, we mentioned how important breakfast is. So basically, having that good protein will also help your brain function a lot better. So just some examples here are bacon, eggs, oatmeal, milk, cottage cheese. If you don't want to have a really heavy meal, something like oatmeal is perfect. Maybe oatmeal with some fruit in it, because that gives you also a little bit of, natural sugars, things like that. Because bacon and eggs might be a little heavy for some people for breakfast, but it's also great. I mean, both of them are very high in protein, and they're really, really good. So definitely recommend having some quality protein the night before and the morning of as well for breakfast. Making a checklist. We sort of went over that already about going to both of the websites and looking for those test day suggestions, and they have them. But a couple of the things that we didn't talk about is having just your admissions ticket, right? Make sure to have that. What about the test center address? Simple thing, but you don't want to be running around in the morning looking for that address, and then you're going to, again, increase your stress level. It's all about keeping your stress level down. So have that test center address ready to go, know where you need to, how long it takes to get there, having your calculator, your pencils. Another simple thing is your clothes, laying out your clothes the night before is a simple thing, but again, one less thing to stress about in the morning. So have those clothes, comfortable clothes, laid out the night before. Okay, cramming. We've touched on that a little bit, but you basically don't want to do the cramming. It's just, it'll increase your stress level. It'll also make you focus on the things you don't know, right? So you just want to focus on being well rested, alert, and confident, and really letting your brain rest is what you want to be doing with 1 day left. Sleep on it. Again, we talked about this. It's so important. It'll improve your mood. You'll be in a better mood for the test, your memory, and your cognitive function. So just shoot for that good night's sleep the night before. And last, getting alarmed. This is a simple one that will keep your stress down, is make sure to have a backup alarm. You might have a phone alarm that you use, or maybe an old school external alarm. Set 2. If you have more than one phone in your family, have one of your parents set their alarm as well as your own alarm, because just in case, because things happen, things always can happen, you have that backup alarm, so you'll make sure you'll wake up and are ready to go for the test. Okay, any questions on any of those? Those are just some sort of lighter fun tips, but I do recommend utilizing some of them because I think they do help. So I did last just want to mention test optional schools, because I'm sure a lot of you who are looking at schools now are finding this is becoming more and more common. We actually have on the slide here fairtest.org. You can actually go there to see if your school that you're interested in will require an ACT or an SAT score. There's actually, I think, well over 1,200 now. I think it's closer to 1,500, because COVID really accelerated the test optional schools. So there's probably quite a few more on the list now. The reason that many schools are doing this is they believe your performance in high school is a better predictor of academic success. There's different goals. They want to increase equity and attract academically capable and diverse and underrepresented student body. The key thing here, though, this is going to be something you want to think about, and we're going all the way back to the beginning where Alexis was talking about merit scholarships. If you are interested in merit scholarships, you still will need a test score for the vast majority. There are some, and that's changing, so you're going to want to look at the requirements, but a lot of them still want to see a test score for a merit scholarship, as well as some schools, even to get in when they say test optional. For example, I believe ASU, in order to get into Barrett honors, they still want to see some test scores. So it's going to be a judgment call. I would really recommend still taking the ACT or SAT and see how you do, because there's going to be different reasons why you might still want to, on the test optional schools, give them your test score. Alexis mentioned if you have a low GPA for various reasons, you might do really well on one of these tests. So you want to have that test score in order to give that to the school to base your application on. As well as if there are multiple students very similar, if their requirements or their resume, their school resume is similar, your ACT or SAT score might bump you up. So even though it says test optional, it doesn't mean you should definitely not give them a test. Now, if you really, really struggle on these tests, and some people do, you might have really great grades, but for various reasons, you just have trouble on some of these tests, that can then be an option for you, and you can talk to the admissions office and get a feel for what they think you should do, whether you should give them an ACT or SAT score. But I would recommend taking the test so you have the option, right? You have that test available to you to then make the decision if you need to. Does that make sense? I know that can be a little bit confusing, but definitely if you're doing merit scholarships, if you're looking for those, you definitely need test scores. Any questions on that? Okay, I think we don't. So no questions?
No questions in the chat. So I think
we're done.
Yeah, unless anybody would like to ask any questions at all, it can be about something we didn't cover in the presentation, something that you wanted to learn, and maybe we didn't discuss.
No.
Alexis and Meryl, let me know when you would like me to proceed to the final slide.
I think you can go ahead because I don't think we have any questions. I wanted to give everybody a moment.
Sure. Okay.
And this presentation will be available. We'll put it, there'll be a link off of the College Depot website. So if there's any information on here that you weren't able to see, you can always refer to it off of our website.
And let me go ahead and send
Sorry, Alexis, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm just going to go ahead and send the link to the PowerPoint.
Okay, so thank you, Alexis and Meryl. My name is Megan Meyerson. Hi, everybody. I am just presenting about our additional summer sessions. We have, this was wonderful. This was about test prep essentials. We have upcoming workshops in the near future in July. So I just want to give a shout out to these upcoming workshops. So essay essentials on the 14th from 4 to 5, scholarships and financial aid also on the 14th from 5 to 6. And then we have some Spanish sessions as well for Spanish speaking parents. These are very informative and would definitely be beneficial to all of you guys if you have any parents that are Spanish speaking. We have Paseos hacia el Futuro on the 16th from 10 to 11, Hablemos sobre becas. On the 21st from 10 to 11, we have re-engage info session. So for parents or individuals that would like to get a high school diploma or GED, that's the 21st from 6 to 6:30. We have craft of profession if you're interested in apprenticeship options. That's the 22nd from 5 to 5:45. And we have KS FAFSA, all about the FAFSA, and that is also for parents on the 28th from 10 to 11. And the link to register is available here. So I encourage all of you students to take a picture of this, or you're welcome to come to College Depot and check us out. We're open, as we mentioned, 6 days a week virtually, Wednesdays and Saturdays in person. And all these workshops are virtually as well. So take it away, Alexis and Meryl, if you have any closing thoughts.
Well, I would just say, again, thank you for coming today. I think you guys are, just the fact that you were here today, you're taking test prep seriously, and just start using some of these free resources and taking those practice tests. That's how you're going to get raise your score and get comfortable and decrease the stress around this test. There's a lot of options, and as long as you utilize all those, you're going to do great.
All right, and thank you everyone again. I'm sorry, I'm having some difficulty sending the PowerPoint over. Let me download it and send it separately so that you guys are able to access that. So just bear with me for a second.
Okay, well, any questions while she's doing that? Well, hopefully you learned some things that you didn't know already, for those of you who are already studying, and even some of the simple tips and tools might be really helpful to you. Sometimes it's the simple ones that end up helping the most. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Would you like me to go back to any of the slides, Meryl or Alexis, or should I stop presenting?
No, I think we're okay. I just can't see the chat, so I just want to make sure. Can you see the chat to just make sure there's no questions?
I unfortunately can't see the chat as well.
So we'll see. Alexis will let us know in a moment.
Any questions right now? I'm trying to give everyone access to the PowerPoint, and I can't figure out. It won't let me send it over Teams for some reason.
Well, they will have access again. Relatively shortly on off of our website. For those of you who you would come to the College Depot website off of the Phoenix Public Library website, and then if you scroll down, there's a bunch of tiles in the middle, but there's one that has, I believe it says videos and programs is the name of the tile, and you should be able to have access to it there once we post it.
Alexis, I can always help you get the list of events, and we can send it out that way too.
Okay, sounds good.
Great idea.
Let's see, I've uploaded it to files over in the files section of the chat. Hopefully people are able to get to that, but otherwise we'll send it via Advanced as well, as it'll be available online. as Meryl said. So I apologize for that.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and hopefully you'll come to one of our other summer sessions that are coming up starting next week.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you guys. Okay, bye. All great job.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye.